Forced to work from home by your employer? Laid off or feeling depressed at home? Do you want to make money working from anywhere? We'll show you how to do it from your couch. It's time for another episode of the Work From Home Show. Coming to you from their homes in Austin, Texas and Tampa, Florida, here are your hosts, Adam and Naresh.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Work From Home Show. Shout out to all our homies, homeboys, homegirls, home trans, all the work from homers out there. I'm Naresh. Today we have Jennifer Donnelly on the show. She is the #1 New York Times bestselling author of The Winter Rose, The Wild Rose, The Tea Rose, A Northern Light, Revolution, The Waterfire Saga, and the new book, Beastly Beauty. Jennifer Donnelly, thank you so much for joining us on the Work From Home Show.
Oh, Naresh, thank you so much for having me.
That's a lot of books, and that's a lot of New York Times bestselling books, a lot of copies sold. I want to go over just your prolific writing career. Let's first start with your story, because you write stories. Let's start with your story. How did you get into writing? Was it something you always liked doing, reading and writing as a little kid? Walk us through that journey from when you were small to college to what you did after college and how you became a full-time author.
Sure. It's something I always loved and wanted and craved to do. I was fortunate to be raised by a wonderful storytelling mom who, just told me verbal stories every night before going to sleep. So this expectation of words and stories and this love of plot and narration was there from an early age. And one of my first childhood kindergarten memories was getting a pencil in my hand and learning how to make letters and learning that letters became words, became sentences. So this just love of story was always there. And I wanted always to tell stories. I was always writing in elementary school and in high school, working on the yearbook, working on the school paper, same in college. And then as a 20-something, decided I wanted to write my first novel. I knew nothing about writing novels, nothing. Just jumped in with both feet and started. And fast forward.
Before you go forward, so
Sure.
were you like an English major or a writing major? And I know you said you worked at the school paper and all that. So tell us about that. And also after college, did you work a full-time job while writing? Or did you just say, I'm just going to work on my book and hang out at my parents' place?
Yeah. So I was writing all throughout high school, papers, of course, writing for the literary journal, working on my school newspaper, working on my yearbook. Same thing in college, just writing all the time. And I was a double major. I double majored in English and history, which is another reason why I was writing all the time. Both those majors are papers all the time. One of my first jobs when I graduated was for a scrappy, feisty, two-fisted upstate New York daily newspaper called the Watertown Daily Times. And that was a fantastic apprenticeship because we were at our desk very early in the morning. Our editor did not want us to be scooped by any other local paper. So we better have the story. We better have it right. We better have it fast. And I learned then that you do not wait for the muse to show up. You sit down, you start working, and she will appear. So that was a really important lesson to me. I got a little bit older, decided I wanted to write my own novel. And as I mentioned, knew nothing about writing novels, just sat down and sort of started to write and started to teach myself. It took me 10 years to get that first manuscript done, a really long time. And at that point, I thought what I had was this, wonderful saleable manuscript. It was the book that eventually became The Tea Rose. It was this rags to riches epic saga about a family in the East End of London in the 1880s and how one of them, the daughter, rises to become a tea merchant in New York. And I, at that point, needed an agent. I knew that much about publishing. So I contacted, just carpet bombed pretty much every agency in New York, didn't know what I was doing. And luckily, I heard back from one, Writer's House, a young agent there, Simon Lipscar, was interested. And he said, this sounds interesting. Send me the few first pages. So I did. And he said, I like these. Send me the rest of the manuscript. And he read that and got back to me and said, the good news is you can write. The bad news is this is way too long. And we have to work on things like, pacing and suspense and narrative tension. So at that point, I went back and with Simon's guidance, redid this giant manuscript and trimmed it down and made it tighter. And then Simon said, okay, this is better. I'll submit it. And he did. And you have to remember, Naresh, at this point, I've spent probably 11 years of my life working on this, cobbling together a freelance existence. And Simon sent it out to pretty much every publishing house in New York. And then I got rejected by pretty much every publishing house in New York. And it was devastating. At that point in my life, I'm watching my friends get ahead in their chosen careers, and they're doctors and lawyers and bankers. And I'm kind of nowhere in my chosen
And
career.
you were what, like early 30s, 31, 32?
At this point, yeah, probably. I would say early 30s, mid 30s. And so Simon, being wonderful, said, take a deep breath and come in off the ledge, calm down. And then a few months later, he resubmitted. And there had been some movement, amongst editors and publishing houses. And a lovely editor, Sally Kim at St. Martin's, bought it for not very much money, especially considering all the time, the years of my life I'd put into this book. But I didn't care. It didn't matter. I was finally going to be what I wanted to be more than anything else, which was a published author. And that night, I literally got up on my dining room table with a bottle of champagne and danced.
So how did that book do? Because it's one thing to get published and to flop. It's another thing to get published and to sell really well and get that second deal and that third deal and that fourth deal, which it seems like you've gotten tens of deals. How many total books have you written? And then tell us about that first book, how well it did.
I think this is my 14th novel, and I think it did respectably well. This was over 20 years ago, so I can't quite remember all the numbers. It got very nice reviews. It didn't pop up to number one on the list. It wasn't that kind of sales, but it was enough to get the next book deal. Which was the second and third book in that series, The Winter Rose and The Wild Rose. And it's exciting and it's what you want. It's also a bucket of cold water over your head because, so much of your life or my life was invested in this one book, and it finally got out there and I was like, yes. And then comes, the reality, oh, wait a minute, I have to write a second, a third, a fourth, and a fifth if I want to make a career out of this. So, that's when it became real and very, very challenging.
You have collaborated with Disney. I think Disney even bought the rights to one or two of your books. Tell us more about your collaboration with Disney and how they approached you.
That happened when I was more of an established author, well into my career. Disney approached me to write a series for middle graders called the Waterfire Saga about mermaids. And I was very attracted to the idea because they were making sort of a world-based series that represented people from all over the world, mer people from all over the world. And it was very diverse, and they wanted it to be, not the Little Mermaid with the clamshell bikini, but they wanted all the mer people to look like the other creatures in their environment. So it was very location specific, and we got to journey from world to world and, make the mermaids off the East African coast look like lionfish with the big spiky fins. And it was really exciting and I loved it. So that was a commission from Disney, and they actually, own that intellectual property. They own those rights. And then they also approached me to do a companion book to the live action Beauty and the Beast tale. You may remember the movie with Dan Stevens and Emma Watson, the musical. It's a gorgeous movie. And they said, come in and out of the timeline. Here's the screenplay. Give us a story we don't know about Beauty and the Beast, something that happened in the castle, but don't alter the timeline, don't mess with characters, don't change too much. And so it was kind of a narrow brief, but also sort of exciting to be able to work with these archetypal characters. And that became lost in a book.
Are there any other movies or shows that you have in the works that are based on your work?
I have, yes. I have, Beastly Beauty is the third in a trilogy of fairy tale retellings. The first was Stepsister, which looks at the whole Cinderella story, but the main characters are the ugly stepsisters. And the second was Poisoned, which looks at the Snow White tale, but delves in much more deeply to the relationship between the Snow White character and the evil queen. And both of those were optioned for feature films. And then I have this series for adults, the Rose Book, the Tea Rose, the Winter Rose, and the Wild Rose. And they've been optioned for a mini-series. So fingers crossed, I'm learning that the wheels can sometimes turn slowly in Hollywood.
Is it your agent who's handling all this? And do you still have that same agent?
Yes, I do. I have two wonderful agents, Simon Lipscar at Writer's House, and he handles the sort of grown-up side of my career. And then Steve Malk, also at Writer's House, who handles the children's young adult side of my career. I've been with them, since the start. They are both wonderful people.
Let's talk a little bit more about Beastly Beauty, because it really flips the narrative. In your version, the rebellious young woman is cursed to be a beast, and the charming thief is the beauty who can break the spell. What I want to talk, because you have touched on that already, but I want to talk a little bit more about today's gender roles. What was the inspiration for this story, and how does it tie into today's social issues?
I guess I kind of just got a bit fed up, with the classic version. In that version, as we all know, the beast calls the shots, and he rages and he shouts and he takes prisoners. And the beauty has to accommodate all that. She has to deny her own wishes as she tries to understand him and help him become a better version of himself. And I kind of had enough of that. I wanted to reverse the story's power dynamic and write the beast as a young woman and the beauty as a young man, and then see what happens. I guess I really just thought times have changed, and so it was time for an update. I do believe that human beings are very, very complex creatures, and we all deserve to fully be who we are and not forced into these kind of one-dimensional roles that maybe don't fit us anymore. So I reversed this power dynamic and told a story of not one, but two complicated and damaged creatures who are both angry and sad, and who, both have the capability to be kind or destructive, and who both have these beastly and beautiful components to their natures, because I feel that's what we human beings are, full of good qualities and strengths, but also a lot of flaws.
Are you traveling around the country getting inspiration, or are you just working from home, watching movies on Disney, getting ideas? Tell us a little bit more about your writing process and where you get your ideas, or how you get your ideas.
Sure. I work from home. I have a lovely little converted stone garage next to my house and a nice office there. And so I work from home, and the ideas are all coming, especially with this fairy tale retelling trilogy that I've just completed, from questions I had. We all hear these fairy tales as very young children, 3, 4, 5 years of age. And they're sort of crazy. They have, the fantastical things happening in them, like wolves, dressing up as your grandmother, and talking mirrors and gingerbread houses. But they have these very deep truths too. And I think they speak to the young child's quest for the truth. Most of us, when we're 4 or 5, our parents are kind of trying to shield us, from those harder truths of the world. But these fairy tales, particularly the Grimm's versions, which pull no punches and give it to you really straight, they are really getting across some very elemental and difficult truths, and those are essentially that the world can be a difficult place, and there can be monsters in that world, and you will at times find yourself hopelessly lost in the dark woods. But then they also give us hope, and they tell us, we can get out of the dark woods, we can beat the monsters, just like Red Riding Hood beat the wolf, or Hansel and Gretel beat the witch. So for me, it's going back to that place of childhood and trying to get answers to these very deep elemental questions I've always had about these ancient tales.
When we're thinking about kids and what we want to expose our kids to, we're the Work From Home show. Our listeners know that I have 2 kids. You can hear one of them in the background most likely, and they are of that age, a 4-year-old and a 1.5-year-old. Maybe I am that protective parent, or that I didn't think I was going to be, but when I hear you speak, I'm like, oh, I am that parent. Are your books, do you have any books that are meant for younger children, or are these books meant more for 10 years of age, 11 years? Because some of your books are really long. There's no way a 5-year-old's going to be able to read them.
Yes, no, I would say the earliest age my books are meant for are sort of that middle grade, maybe 8 to 9, 10, 11, 12 for the Waterfire Saga and Lost in a Book. And then the young adult books like Stepsister and Poison and now Beastly Beauty are more for ages 14 and up.
Okay, well, Jennifer Donnelly, thank you so much for joining us on the Work From Home show. Any final thoughts or anything else you want to add? Let our listeners know.
Yeah, sure. Just to go back to that story I originally, was telling you about how I became a published author. Probably some of your listeners are aspiring authors as well. And there's something I really want to share with them. And it's what I learned from that whole long, difficult experience. And it's this, that no one could ever guarantee me that I would get published throughout those long and hard years of not getting it done and fielding rejections. But one person could guarantee that I wouldn't be published, and that was me if I gave up. So if your listeners are out there, if they're struggling with writing or other projects, just believe in yourself and never, ever, ever give up.
Never give up. I think that's great advice, especially when it comes to writing. I'm an author myself, and I'm trying to write my next book. I don't want to say I gave up, but I keep procrastinating and making excuses for myself. So it's even if you don't give up, don't procrastinate, don't make excuses, just do it. Just write.
Exactly. And it's hard, Naresh. You mentioned you have little children, you have a job. It's hard to find time to fit in, your creative pursuits and your goals for writing. But be easy on yourself, be gentle on yourself, take it one step at a time, and just don't give up.
The website is jenniferdonnelly.com. That's Donnelly, Donnelly, jenniferdonnelly.com. Any other websites, Jennifer, or social media that we should know about?
Yeah. Social media, you can follow me on all my platforms at Jen Writes Books.
Jen Writes Books. Thank you so much, Jennifer Donnelly, for joining us. And to all our listeners, check us out at workfromhomeshow.com. That's www.workfromhomeshow.com. Get on our mailing list there. Follow us on social media. We're on X. We're on Facebook. If you have any questions, hello@workfromhomeshow.com. That's hello@workfromhomeshow.com. And until next week, keep on working from home.